Oh man, here they come again.
Here they come again. This still has skin on the skull.
So here's the lowdown, guys. Everybody talks about the Babylon working ritual with Jack Parsons and L. Hubbard, who were in Miami at one point when Hubbard had stolen Parsons' girlfriend and his boat. And allegedly, when Hubbard took off, Parsons conjured up the spirit of Mars or some crazy demonic entity and brought them back in. That was off the East Coast, and they ended up catching him. He ended up coming back. And nobody talks about, so the Babylon working was 1940s, and we have in the 1980s, the Evans Keenan cell workings, okay? And this Jeffrey D. Evans guy was the head of the Typhonian OTO in the United States, okay? And there is this whole book who was co-written or I guess organized by Lavenda, in which they were doing a series of sex magic rituals in Miami, Florida, because Miami, Florida was a power zone, what they call the power zone. Now, if you know anything about the Typhonian OTO, which I know Isaac does.
What's a power zone?
So a power zone is a place where you can essentially contact things on the other side. So a power zone, like a portal pretty much.
So but like, it gets like a charged area.
A charged area. But here's the kicker, okay, because you guys are talking about Antarctica. The power zones move around because the power zones are parallel in space and in time. And it gets crazy. It gets crazy because you're talking about portals. Well, Tony, these people believe, because you talk about mind portals, well, the whole aspect of as above, so below, microcosm, macrocosm, if we all are all stars, how Thelema states, well, how there is in outer space, portals, black holes, things to enter into other dimensions, faraway galaxies, planets, et cetera, well, guess what? You can tap those in us, right? This is, again, Thelemic views, right? I'm talking about the Thelemic views. And this is where yoga comes into play, because they believe that by positioning their body in certain ways, they can access these other realities and use their actual body as a portal. So to bring forth these entities into, so what ends up happening was in 1980s, this guy and his wife, and they end up doing these crazy, bizarre rituals. And you can read about it. It's called the Rites of the Mummy, the Law Cell, and the Secret Creed to Liber Al by Jeffrey D. Evans and Peter Lavenda. Now, again, it gets very, very weird. So just a heads up. But essentially, what this guy ends up doing is in 1984, I believe, April 2nd, 1984, he ends up, they were trying to induce an abduction. And it ended up happening. And this guy ends up becoming impregnated by these alien entities. The guy, because I left out that he was actually a cross-dresser and he's cross-dressing during this magical ritual. Again, it's a whole crazy thing. So he gets up impregnated, not by a baby, but by this crazy secret mathematical formula in order to decipher Liber Al, the Book of the Law, by Aleister Crowley. And it's all ties into pi. So the string of numbers, 1 point, whatever. And essentially how pi is this key in other realms to be able to decipher their reality. Again, it gets very, very crazy, but this all happened in Miami, okay? This all happened in this power zone that the head of the Typhonian OTO at the time, they were doing these sex magic rituals. And again, there's a reason why SpaceX is here. We have NASA here. We have Disney World, the most magical place on earth. We have all these different things, and we have the history of Florida is directly tied to John D. Rockefeller, okay, and our Federal Reserve System. I'm sure you guys have heard of the Tim Bent and Rob Skiba Federal Reserve interview that he's done, where at the Rockefeller Cottage in Jekyll Island was an old sacrificial site for the Timucua, which the Timucua in Florida have been tied to the Nephilim, these giants that were here. And there's evidence, again, this is all Narco-Longo territory, where Florida was perhaps either the Garden of Eden or remnants of Atlantis. And that all ties into this Typhonian, Thelemic, magical, Atlantean magic, right? That right with Bimini and the remnants and all that stuff. And we have this at the center of it all, the Bermuda Triangle, which is one of these gateways. Okay. So we have the H.P. Lovecraft elements of it, the Lovecraftian Cthulhu mythos elements, which, by the way, Lovecraft lived near the Bridgewater Triangle, which you just finished covering not too long ago. What do they have there? They have the same sort of thing. Entities coming through, UFOs, and the Typhonian OTO, according to Kenneth Grant's work, it's all about tying in magic as the form of technology to interact with these alien / demonic / whatever entities that you want to insert here. Okay. So I think that's why Florida has been at the center of a lot of things. I mean, there's a reason why the Florida man archetype is a thing, because I believe, in my opinion, the energy here in Florida, if you can't handle it, it'll drive you insane. It'll have you chewing people's faces off. I mean, there's dudes chewing other dudes' faces off here in Florida. You know, that was the whole thing for a while. That really tripped me out when I just graduated high school. I was like, what in the world? Can you imagine some dude just gnawing your face off? That's the Florida man archetype. Anything that you hear about, you go, must have been Florida, because it's crazy here. And it's spiritual. And I don't think, in my opinion, because I was on Christmas Eve, and I'll leave it towards the end. On Christmas Eve, I was right down the road at the Patricia and Robert Frost Museum, which I could see from the top where I was. I could look over and see the Bayside Marketplace. There's a nice area in downtown Miami, Brickell. I could see the Bayside Marketplace, okay, which is right on the water. So I was there Christmas Eve. Now, I'll leave it towards the end of what I think might have happened. But I think these things were not physical entities, but more of metaphysical, demonic entities. And my whole thing is, I don't know about you guys, but lately, and I talked about this a little bit a while back on my show, I've been seeing shadows in my peripheral vision. And I was just in Georgia, and I had a crazy one where I thought there was somebody walking up on me. I turned around, there was nobody there. So this has been happening to me more and more. And I actually talked about that on my show, and I had a whole bunch of people hitting me up. Like, hey, I've been having that too happen to me. It's like, what's going on? Is CERN on overdrive? Have they turned up, to 110? Like, what's happening? And I think this could have been part of that whole situation.
Yeah, I mean, these definitely don't. I don't think that what people were describing, I don't think it sounds very physical to me at all. I mean, I've even heard, I think it was last night I was on a space on Twitter, and the guy was talking about, his experience. And I think he said that the bodies were almost triangular, if I remember correctly. Joel, you were in there, right? Did he say that?
Yeah, he did, but he also said that they were phasing in and out of consciousness. So when he turned around, he saw them in front of him. And he said he wasn't scared of them because they were actively trying to harm anybody, but he said he was fearful of it. I didn't know what it was. And so he just kind of took off and ran like everybody else. There was a whole other report of the one guy that saw the nerd kids that came in with like some sort of box and went and sat in the middle of the mall and turned some sort of box on that created some sort of energy field around it. And he even he's a graffiti artist, also a DJ, and he drew what came out. And it's very Shadow Man-like, because the foot came out, the arm came out, and then it wasn't even really a head. It was more of like some sort of projection of some sort of head that came out with it. And he said that there were people that were concealed carry, started shooting at it. But the kids that came in, they just went in there and set it up and just started doing this. So, again, we don't know what's true. The guy could be trolling too, but everybody that's had an experience there, from what I'm starting to gather, that these experiences aren't of flesh and blood, really. Like, it's more of entity forms, shadow forms, that's coming out of there. I haven't heard yet of a report of something that was just like a Nephilim or a Nephilim that was 8 feet tall, 9 feet tall, that looked humanoid, that was walking around, stomping around. These things seem to be phasing in and out of reality. And I am leaning more towards that as the more I've heard. Now, again, people could just be piggybacking off each other and saying, well, I heard this guy say this, so I'm going to follow along with what he said and put this similar story out. Who knows, right? But in that aspect, I think that that's where my mind's going on it. I do think that there's a high probability of a portal being open, very similar to what Juan was just talking about, with anything Crowley was doing. Kenneth Grant talked about all that, the Amalantra workings, any of that stuff is very similar to probably what was going on there. If it was a portal that opened up.
And I want to add too that according to Lavenda, because Justin brought up the sea creatures, sea monsters. Well, part of that is the Lovecraftian aspect of it, right? The Shadow over Innsmouth and all these crazy, where it's like these half fish, half humanoid creatures, right? Feeding on the townsfolk, whatever it is. They do sacrifices at the end of the year towards them, right? The deep ones, all these Lovecraftian aspects. Well, according to Peter Lavenda, Florida is the, pull it up here, he refers to as not the fountain of youth, but the fountain of death. And according to Lavenda, Florida is actually the best place for the manifestation or summoning of these deep ones, of these great old ones, because, and I'm going to pull it up here, this is directly from that book, the old ones, in other words, had no use for their humanity. Other indications that Florida is a geographical and topographically ideal for the evocation of such entities, such as Cthulhu and Dagon, are the fact that they are geologically, where am I? Golly. Geologically, the region is composed of primarily coral, which is the melded bones of dead colonies of the type of primal sea creatures that represent the old ones. Astrally, in the fact that its shores are lined with mangrove swamps, mangroves being the plant of the old, indicating of the old ones, a tree, a type of tree that is especially representative of the old ones. There is the Everglades, a vast sea of grass, serving as a filter system to the inland waters of North America, et cetera, et cetera. Then there are the bones of Florida, great quantities of ancient bones, some of them belonging to animals now extinct. And there have been numerous findings of bog people, completely intact skeletons of people because of the low acidity in the water here. They find entire bodies fully preserved with brain matter and everything, thousands of years old. So they have that. He goes on here, the coral caverns and tunnels that underlie the northern 2/3 of the state. The porous limestone has helped to create the phenomenon known as sinkholes. One of my fears is, and I did a whole video on this, we interviewed a cave diver here in Florida, and they go into these little holes, and rest in peace, because he actually died in a cave system like a couple months ago, the guy that we interviewed. And they'll squeeze into these little holes in these aquifers, and they come out and there's these massive cave systems. Well, the problem with that is the places that they were going to were underneath neighborhoods. So think about it. You're laying in bed here in Florida, and it could be 5-10 feet of limestone before you're at the top of 100-foot drop, because under there is a tunnel system and you're at the top of 100-foot drop. So whenever I'm sleeping here at night in Florida, that's what I'm thinking. I go, maybe underneath me is a whole cavern that people get sucked up by these sinkholes, never to be seen again. Okay, these sinkholes open up, and the people are gone. They don't find them. Sometimes they've heard stories of them like screaming for help. There's nothing you can do. Once the ground opens up, you're gone. So we have here and then in South Florida, there was the spread of ancient African cults and their Santeria, Paolo, different versions of Vodun or voodoo. Now, I'm not here to piss anybody off, because I've gotten emails and stuff of people who are witches and practitioners of these things. Again, no disrespect to you, but I'm just reiterating the literature. Okay. So just a disclaimer there. And so we have this whole South Floridian magical community that was prevalent, especially in the earlier, 80s and all that stuff there. So, and during the 1970s, I posted about that story of Hysteria High, which was this private school that allegedly they were doing Ouija board seances, and this little girl got possessed and started screaming in a voice that wasn't hers, that she was the devil, that she was Satan. There was this other thing where this little boy jumped out of a window with like superhuman strength, jumping around, demonically possessed. Again, these are all first-hand accounts. And come to find out, the Memorial Hospital on there, one of them, I had to ask my wife which one it was because she's from Miami. And I was like, where's this hospital at? She's like, well, that's the one over by where we went to over here. And according to the Tribune in the 1970s, they were treating up to 700 demonic possessions a month.